Leaders, real life leaders.
Hey guys, welcome to today's episode. And I have Mark Monchek, and he is going to be talking to us about where did all the employees go? How are we going to hire and retain employees for life? He has written an amazing book called The Culture of Opportunity, How to Grow Your Business in an Age of Disruption. And I feel like we just keep getting more and more and more disruption. Just it's like jab, 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 hook, uppercut. It just doesn't end. So Mark, welcome.
Thank you, Chantel. Excited to be on the show. And this topic is basically on everybody's mind, because we had what we call the Great Resignation, where millions of people have left the workforce. But I call it the Great Reassessment, because actually people have not necessarily resigned to go on a mountaintop. They have not gone on welfare. They have actually are starting businesses. They are working side hustles. They are going to other companies. They're moving to jobs which pay them better, have better, benefits. So it's not like people are dropping out for the most part. It's really they're changing how they want to work. And companies need to understand that the relationship between employees and employers has changed forever.
Yeah. So this is really good. I want to stay here for just a second. And I feel like a lot of people have been hearing the Great Resignation and they've been talking about that. And I want to stay there. But one of the things that I just had experienced, we just hired a web developer maybe 4 months ago, and just a brand new junior developer where we're going to teach him. And we literally trained and taught him everything for the first 4 months. And he was like, I love working here and I'm just so grateful for what you guys have taught me. But I did get a call from, I wasn't looking, but somebody recruited me from Indeed, and I'm getting paid $150,000. And, obviously I love working here, but for me to get 3 times my salary, that's a huge deal. And so I'm giving my, 2-3 weeks notice. And so again, that's a blow to us, right? And, I know that I've got friends who are feeling that way as well, of kind of these, especially in the web department, of people, some of these larger companies coming in and offering 3 times the salary that we're paying, number one. So let's kind of dive in on there first, because like you said, it's not just, I think with the Great Resignation, a lot of people were talking about a lot of people retiring, right? But that's not all the reasons. So I want to first dive in on what are all the reasons why we're feeling such an edge on this job market.
So what you have is people having the threat of dying under COVID. We went from a time where people felt relatively safe, and suddenly you could die by being in the wrong place at the wrong time, gone to the wrong hospital. And so I think that trauma, the collective trauma that we experience in the United States and around the world, caused people to think, wow, if I could die tomorrow, what is my life really about? And what kind of job do I want to have that actually means something? So people are assessing all kinds of things. And then when they started to work remotely, they realized, I've been commuting, spending 7 hours a week, or maybe even 15 hours a week in a car, not happy. And so when people realized they have more control over the work, they wanted to have more say over how they work, where they worked, and how much they're paid. Now, the other thing that happened is in the former administration, they cut off a lot of immigration from countries that had technology employees. And so that immigration shut off countries like India and China, South America. That also limited the number of employees at that higher level that were not able to come here. As technology has exploded, as people started ordering more online and doing things that are more technology driven, technology jobs are scarcer, and those, of course, are being paid more. So to your example, Chantel, if somebody is going to get 3 times what they're being paid at your job, you can't do anything about that. That is just something you have to accept. However, what you can do is to be really clear when people go for the interview, what is the most important thing to them? And if one of the most important things to them is the mission of your company, the work that they do, the meaning that they get out of your work, that is a different level if somebody's coming in just because they want to get a career step or they want to make some money. You want to make sure there's an alignment between the values of your company and the work that they're doing for you and what you care about and they care about.
Now, I've heard that, some people, they started calling this the Great Resignation. And then people started calling it, instead of the Great Resignation, they called it the Great Renegotiation. Have you heard that term?
Absolutely.
Okay, so talk about that. What does that mean? And why are people calling that the Great Renegotiation?
Well, because before COVID, people thought, well, in order to get a good job and a good pay, I need to do what my employer says. So if I have to commute 2 hours a day and I have to show up at work at 8:30 in the morning and I have to leave at 6:30, well, that's what I got to do. But when COVID hit and people are not going to the office for the most part, people said, wow, I can actually work at home and I can have more freedom. Maybe I can go to my kid's soccer game, or maybe I can actually get to the doctor that I haven't been to for a couple of years. I really like this. But they were also working on weekends, they were working evenings. And so there was a trade-off. They had more flexibility, but they also had more burnout in some cases because people didn't really know what is the difference between work and personal life when I am actually working in the place where I do my personal life. So they've been renegotiating with their employers. They've also been renegotiating with their spouses about who does the housework. They've been renegotiating with their kids, with their home with their kids about maybe doing more chores and helping their kids with their homework. So there's a whole reassessment and renegotiation on all kinds of fronts.
And I think that it's also a byproduct of inflation. Workers are they're saying, I've got to keep up with the rising cost of living. I know for me, my husband was yelling at me because he was like, what are we doing? Why are we spending so much money on groceries? Because we do like to go out to eat too. And he's like, how are we spending this much money on groceries and still going out to eat as much as we do? And I'm like, we eat very organic and clean and top of the line. And I tell him, and plus I order them on, Instacart or whatever. So then they charge even more on there. But it really has the amount of the rising cost of living in general and the inflation has got people thinking, oh my gosh, I need to, even if I like where I'm working, I need to go out and look for something a little bit more because I'm, trying to keeping up with the surging prices of everything. Do you feel like that's part of it as well?
I think that inflation is a very person and family specific situation. So if you drive a lot and if you have a big car, you're going to pay a lot of money when you get to the gas pump. If you are somebody like myself who lives in a city and I bike everywhere or walk everywhere, the cost of gasoline doesn't really affect me. 40% of Americans, believe it or not, actually own their own home and have paid off their home. So the home price thing and the cost of various things, mortgages and so forth, interest rates, they don't affect very much the people who own their own homes and have paid off those homes. So it's very, very situational. So yes, absolutely, there's a lot of people who are worried about inflation and need to make more money or need to save more money. And hence, a lot of people have moved out of expensive areas like New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and moved into more rural areas because they actually can work there. So for some people during the great reassessment, great renegotiation, their costs have gone down because they were able to work from a place which cost them much less.
Yeah. And I think the situation that I just told you about, I think a lot of these companies were working in person, right? And they've now decided, I've heard, we have a very large Geico call center here. And the people there told me that the CEO of Geico announced that they will never, not that it's, for the next year or 2 years, but they will be working from home forever. That is their new plan. That's what they're doing. And the reason that they did that was because they were losing so many, as soon as they started to bring them back in, they were losing so many employees because they said USAA, Amazon, some other people, they were poaching their people and recruiting so many of them, and their people wanted to stay home. So now a lot of these larger companies are having people work from home. And because they're working from home, now places like Indeed, right, who's based out of San Francisco, is now poaching my guy here and saying, okay, well, the cost of living in San Francisco, we're paying for a junior engineer $150,000 and so forth. So that's, I think, has something to do with it as well.
So for employers, the more flexible you can be, the more you can hire for specific jobs, understand the job market, understand what particular people need in order for them to be happy and stay with you, the better you're off, you're going to be. However, people do like to go to the workplace to actually have social relationships with their colleagues, to feel like they're part of a company. So I think the best employers today have a hybrid situation where they have a lot of flexibility for people to work wherever they are, but they also have a workplace which they've redesigned, which is more for people gathering for meetings, having retreats, having trainings, having experiences like social events for the company that they didn't have before because it wasn't really something people thought about. Now, to your example of somebody who is going to be paid 3 times more, I guess that kind of situation, you have to really look at, well, what is the job market for this particular role? And maybe they're overpaying for this guy, and maybe there is somebody else who can do that job really, really well, who doesn't want to work for a large company, who likes working for a smaller company, who likes some of the things that you have that Indeed does not have.
And now a word from our sponsor. This episode is brought to you by Chantel Realty.
One of the other things we give you is revenue share, where you get 5 levels of money in your downline every time you attract an agent to the company. And guess what? The first 3 levels open up right away. So let's pretend like you're not a great recruiter, but you bring on a couple people who are heavy hitters. Guess what? You don't have to hire 5 or 10 agents to open up those tiers. You automatically get those. So that's what makes us very different.
This is Chantel.
Yes. And the other piece that I want to ask you about, because what really, I want to tell you the story about Geico, because the managers have said that since they have gone to working all remote, the productivity of all of the sales staff combined is more than a loss of a productivity by about 30 to 35%. So with that being said, the CEO knows that the loss of productivity is a loss of by 35%. And he has still made the stance that we will be working remote from here on. That is his final call. So what is your opinion on that? And are you seeing overall the productivity go down for those who are staying home?
Again, I think it's very much a case-by-case basis. So you asked me at the beginning of the show to give examples. So I'm going to give you a very specific example of one of our clients and kind of walk you through some of the things that we did with them that maybe will help some of your listeners see what is possible in creating what we call in our company a culture of opportunity. So one of our clients is a large national retailer of consumer electronics, where about 80% of the revenue comes from their online business. They have a retail store, they have a rental company, they have a printing company. They have about 7 companies within this conglomerate of companies, all in the space of consumer electronics for creators. So they sell cameras, filmmaking equipment, podcasting equipment, pro audio, musical instruments, anything that a creator or an adventurer, because they also have a sporting goods division, would love. Now, this is a company that never had anybody working remote, with a very, very few exceptions. Very specialized people lived outside of the country. As soon as COVID hit, our CEO of our client understood that we had to move very quickly and help them go remote literally within days, because imagine you're a $1 billion retailer. You cannot have a day where you're not selling anything. That is a loss of millions of dollars of revenue. So we created a program called Share Lab to help people who had never worked remotely feel cared about, connected, and functioning effectively. So we went through every single department in this company, which is about 1,000 employees, and we set up Zoom conferences department by department, and we asked them 3 questions. Where are you calling from? Because a lot of times their colleagues sat next to them for 10 years, didn't know where they lived. What is inspiring you and what is troubling you? And each month we would change the questions. And through having this kind of mixture of a town hall and a coaching session, we kept people feeling cared about and connected. We found problems with onboarding new employees who were onboarded remotely. We found training issues that weren't being addressed. And we were able to feed back these issues anonymously without mentioning who said it to the Human Resource Administration or the CEO's senior staff. And we fixed so many problems so quickly because we had this really tight communication funnel that happened throughout the whole 2 years, and we're still doing it.
Mm. So what would you say, let's talk about kind of if someone of a medium-sized business was listening to this and you would say, okay, here's like my 5 tips of what we can do to kind of help hire more employees, help retain employees. So if someone came to you and they said, look, we are so short-staffed, our people are getting burnout. I just talked to a friend of mine and she said she's so short-staffed that her people are working, 10, 11-hour days. And she's worried about them because they're great, but you can't work these people but so long and without hiring new people. And now they're getting burnout.
Well, Chantel, I'm going to give you 5 concepts or 5 principles, and I'm not calling them tips because I think what's happened in the Great Renegotiation, as you mentioned, that we call it, is a profound shift in the social contract between employees and employers. And employers need to understand they can no longer hire, quote unquote, human capital. These are human beings who you are now dependent on, right? Beforehand, we kind of took it for granted. We got the money, we got a good salary, we'll hire somebody, they'll do what we tell them to do. That is no longer the case. So the first principle is treat your employees as your partners, as people that you have to have an alignment between how much they're getting paid, how they want to work, where they're going to work, all the things that matter to you and to them has to be in alignment. So treat your employees, whether they're 1099s or whether they're W-2 employees, treat them as partners and get an alignment. Number 2, understand what they care about. Understand what's important to them and have them understand what's important to you and make sure you can address what's important to them so that you're actually making that match work really well. And if they understand what's important to you, they will have a great match. So in our company, we have not lost anybody during the pandemic. We've actually hired a few people, but we are in a constant discussion with our employees about what they want and what we need as a company. And we're adapting to that literally week by week, because sometimes things happen that, I have one of my staff, one of my senior people has a mother who is in Russia right now. And as you know, there's a tremendous war going on between Russia and the Ukraine. So I want to adapt to make that person who I care deeply about feel that she can take some time off, that she can feel like she can do what she can do to help her mother. And I'm not expecting the same level of productivity for the next couple of weeks because that's the reality is she needs to really do the best she can for her mother. Other employees are not having that issue, and I can ask some of our teammates to step in and take over some of the work that she has done because they care about her and they've gotten somebody to help them when they've had a personal issue that they needed some help with. So one of the things that we do on every team meeting, and I know you guys have team meetings twice a week on, I think, Mondays and Thursdays, and I love the way that you communicate so quickly with your employees, is we have a bandwidth discussion. How is your bandwidth this week? And what can we do to help you, or what can you do to help us if you have a little extra bandwidth to give over to the team?
I like that. As far as hiring, when you're looking for new people, do you have kind of some things that you go, if I had to give someone, here's the 5 things that I look for, number 1, on hiring someone new, and what are some of the tips that you give people of kind of, this has been the best outlets for us to recruit new talent?
Well, let's talk about how we hire as companies traditionally, and how we as a company, Opportunity Lab, hires, because I think we have a model which is really unique. And there are some companies who are doing something like this, and I think it really works well. If somebody comes to your company, Chantel, Kanzel Realty, one of the businesses that you own, and they like your company, they feel that the salary is fair, they think it's a pretty good job, and they work for you. And then 6 months later, they get an offer from somewhere else, and they go, yeah, like your employee who did the web designer said, I like working here, but this is such a good offer. But let's say that employee came from one of your existing employees, and that person had a personal relationship, personal connection, and they came to the firm because they really knew about how you operate. They knew your values. They knew the history of your firm. There's a bond there in that hiring situation that is not there when somebody comes and really doesn't know you. They're kind of testing you out, and they don't know what's going to happen in the future. So we hire through our networks. So if you have, let's say a person might have 1,500 direct connections on LinkedIn, somebody who's really active on LinkedIn, 3 degrees of separation from that person can connect you with about 16 million people. If you think about the power of the network effect, so when you go out and you look at people's networks to expand the hiring pool, and you find somebody who you might know or somebody you might know knows that person, they come to the company, it's a warm hire, just like a warm lead in business. It's easier to close that. It's easier to keep people connected, and it's easier to retain people when they come in and they have some relationship with the company or the people who are working at that company. So we have a whole methodology of doing resource mapping and kind of using our ecosystem of resources to attract talent. And we've attracted some great talent using that methodology. Now, not every company can do that, but certainly giving employees referral bonuses has worked very well for our clients because employees will wake up and they'll think, you know what, I know somebody. I know one of your guests recently said that they had hired somebody that their massage therapist recommended. And that hire was a hire that never would have been made if that person would have been open to reaching out to somebody that they knew.
I love that. Now, I know that you have written this great book. I'm so excited to read it, The Culture of Opportunity, How to Grow Your Business in an Age of Disruption. Tell listeners, give everyone maybe 2 tidbits that are like the best parts of the book to kind of give them a little bit of an appetite of what the book is about.
I'm going to give you a story because I know you love stories on the show, and I love stories too. And this is one of the most profound stories that is illustrated in the book. So back in 2011, we were asked by a very, very well-known nonprofit in New York City that had a mission to eliminate adult illiteracy. So there are 10% of Americans, about 35 million people, cannot read or write functionally in the United States today. It's a massive problem. So they were wanting to create a higher level of awareness about this problem and create a certification program for adult educators. So if you're a teacher of children, you have to get a degree and you have to get certified as a school teacher, right? In an elementary school, a high school, and university. But adult education, right? People who are learning later in life, there is no certification for that. So this nonprofit wanted to go out and create a national summit on adult literacy to help the level of awareness, to raise money for their program, which they wanted to basically certify adult educators and expand the level and pay for those educators to help this problem of adult illiteracy. But they didn't know how to do it. So we built them a resource map. And on that resource map, we had 26 key people, 17 organizations. We had 5 markets they did business in, huge amount of knowledge, a lot of communication through website, through media, through YouTube, but only 3 sources of capital. And they were really needing to bring in funding to be able to do this national summit. So we said, all right, let's create a new resource map. Let's have more people contribute it. And let's have a burning platform. Just sort of hypothetical question. If you had to raise $3 million in 3 months or your business would close, who would you ask? Chantel, suddenly 17 new sources of capital came on this resource map. 3 of them with the last name of Soros, George Soros and his 2 children. There was dead silence in this room. Somebody screamed out, "Who knows George Soros and his children? How come nobody ever said anything?" The woman who knew George Soros, who was the director of education, said, "Nobody ever asked me." So this woman, director of education, and the director of development sat no more than 10 feet from each other, but there was no methodology to share resources with each other until we built this resource mapping program. We then had the first ever national summit on adult literacy. We had researchers from Harvard. We had Pulitzer Prize winners. We had leaders from different nonprofit organizations, and we helped them raise capital and awareness and get a film done from CNN screened at this summit. So this was the light bulb moment, Chantel, when I realized that there are so many resources in organization, you have to have a methodology to share them, which is our program, which we call Unlock Your Resources, where you actually have a methodology to share resources about hiring, about customers, about partners, about anything that's important to your business.
Love it. Well, Mark, tell listeners where they can find you and where they can follow you.
So we are all over different aspects of the web. So we have a website, opplab.com, OPPLAB.com. On our website, you can get a free assessment, or you can listen to our many podcast appearances and different white papers. We are on YouTube, so we have a YouTube channel, OpLab TV. We have an active LinkedIn community under Opportunity Lab, or you can reach me on LinkedIn. And if you want to reach us directly, discover@opplab.com, and somebody will respond directly back to you.
Great. Well, thank you for being here, and you guys stay tuned. We've got another episode coming up in just a few. Bye-bye for now.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Real Life Leadership. If you'd like to get the show notes or access more resources, log on to reallifeleaders.com/podcast to get the show notes from this episode and any other resources we might have mentioned. And also, we'd love to hear from you. Be sure to review or rate this podcast on Apple Podcasts to help spread the word. And if you have any leadership questions you want answered, email podcast@reallifeleaders.com.